Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast, The Making of Stories. I'm your host, Jawad Mir. Today, my guest is Stewart Sugg. He is one of the directors of a new series that premiered last week on Netflix called India versus Pakistan, The Greatest Rivalry. It is a mini-series, 3 episodes, about 30 to 40 minutes each episode, that encapsulate the story between these two countries' cricket teams, starting from, early 90s or more so mid to late 90s all the way to now, but the main crux of the part is like mid 2000s. And it was a great conversation. We talked about cricket, we talked about his experience in India and Pakistan while he was filming, the food, the culture, the stars, the celebrities, and everybody else. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Stewart Sugg. The series, India versus Pakistan, what's the exact title? I forgot the rivalry.
The
Uh,
Greatest Rivalry.
Thank you. India
Yeah.
versus Pakistan, The Greatest Rivalry, the series on Netflix, 3-part episode. I just 20 minutes ago I finished watching it, which is why when you emailed, when I saw you in, I'm like, oh, I haven't finished it yet. Um, but yeah, it was something that I've grown up with cricket, even being in Canada for most of my life, and that rivalry is always something that you're excited about, and there were some things in there that I had seen before. I had heard all the stories, but just kind of watching it all together, it was very engaging and fun to watch. So thank you so much for working on it. I appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure. And I think that's always the balance, isn't it? You've got a lot of people who are passionate about the sport and know everything about it. And yet you have to also cater for those who know nothing about it. So that's the line you always walk with these kind of projects.
Yeah. And I was watching it, and obviously one of the things that I picked up was because I know cricket, and I was trying to figure out when did you guys start filming it, and I obviously with the Ramiz Raja interview, him being part of PCB,
Yes.
which was what, a year and a half ago, I think. I could be wrong.
I
So
think
obviously it was before
yeah,
that.
initially there was we filmed something in 2021 around the World Cup initially.
Okay.
Um, and that was when obviously Pakistan beat India, and there were those repercussions afterwards of what happened. So we shot in the UAE, and there was that rather extreme reaction in India about it, and those students who were jailed for celebrating Pakistan's win. And it instantly introduced me to you know what this series would mean. And after that, we shot in the year after that, sort of thing. So it's taken a while to get to screen, but it's always about getting the balance right. And I think this kind of subject is so tricky to actually get all the different elements right. So that everyone feels happy. It's so tied up with politics. The cricket, really,
Yeah.
despite not, it shouldn't be really. But that's the heady mix, really. Is we're trying to get that process right. So there are different iterations as it went along, but we got to a line now which is more focused on sort of, well, 2004 was always the focus, but it sort of it centers around that. I think previously we talked about having a time now that went back to when the sport was introduced and why it appealed to India, which was India at the time it was just India by itself, and the fact that really the British used it as a game to divide and rule to a certain extent. And what one of the journalists, talks about that time in some of the rushes we have, but the idea that you would be put into a different team depending on your religion, it seems totally absurd, but that's what the British did, in these tournaments set in Mumbai. So that we had some of that history in it, but I think maybe that stuff was probably too distant. But I was interested in that stuff and how that kind of affected the game and the history of maybe also the country. So yeah, that was very very interesting to kind of look at that.
I'm actually surprised. I mean, I can see from the creative standpoint that, to me, that is way more interesting. Nothing to take away from the series, but just the root of all that. I mean, just to explore that, whether, the audience kind of reached its own conclusion, but that was taken out. You guys had sort of figured out everything from the beginning to end, like
There
storyboard
was
and shoot.
Yeah, it was all. I mean, the series was all structured around. I mean, 2004 was always the heart. So actually, what we did was we had 2004 was all the way through it right from the start, and we went back and forth in time from 2004. Um, and some of that stuff went by the way. I mean, I think there's a commercial consideration about it, and some people think maybe that's not stuff people want to hear. But I found it fascinating. That one of our journalists talked about how why was it about cricket? Why did it appeal to that part of the world? And it's a sport which you can be right at the top, and you can be the best, and you can be taken right down to the bottom, and yet you can also fight your way from the bottom to the top. And those kind of sentiments I thought was really interesting. It was very rule based, but also within that, it's about also facing someone face to face. It's an individual sport as well. And I think some of those things we looked at as the root love of the game. Where did that come from? And that's what kind of interested me as well, and how the Empire and some of those things kind of wove into that storyline.
And the reason for that sort of not to be there, was it a collective thing or was it more like a Netflix thing that we need to follow certain timelines and
I think
duration?
ultimately, yeah. I mean, I think ultimately there was a direction towards simplifying the narrative and making it consumable by a larger audience. And I think maybe that was, you and a lot of other people would have found that very interesting, but maybe it would have cut out some people. The footage from that time from 30s, there is some. And there's some interesting footage of those tournaments between different religions, but it's not what people see these days, and I think maybe there's a fear that if you start showing black and white footage and you talk about those times, it can put people off. But that's what happens in these kind of projects, and the balance was always going to be tricky.
So if I heard you right, and I didn't know this historically, so there in the 30s there were teams based on religion.
Yeah, there was. I forget the actual name of the tournament now, but there was four different types, and there was the English, there was Hindus, there was Muslims, and there was one other group as well. I can't remember right now,
The
but
the
those.
Sikhs,
It wasn't Sikhs. No, no.
Parsis, Ismailis,
Yes, yes. What was the one you said? The
Parsis.
Parsis. Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
Parsis. I think that's right. I mean, forgive me if I get this wrong. It
No,
was
no,
a,
it's okay.
it was a while back when he was in, but it was a tournament which was at the time incredibly popular. I mean, thousands of people flocked to it, and you can see why, because people like having, you know, they like having their own thing to fight for. But also, it's incredibly, looking back on it now historically, how dangerous that kind of sentiment is, especially when what was going on at the time, pre and post war, the pull to pull the country apart, which is where the empire kind of started as well, and what the empire did to sort of shake up India and kind of destroy the unity that was there. So cricket kind of carried on that storyline to a certain extent, and I think looking into that from my point of view, it's sort of you do feel a bit of a historical shame about it, really, about what happened. And actually, India, despite having some issues, people got along kind of okay, and certainly maybe better than now. So there was a the Indian family was bigger and included lots of different religions, and that seemed to be okay. But yeah, the British shook that up, and I thought cricket was part of that way of shaking things up.
Would you ever want to take all the stuff that you prepared for that part that didn't make the film and do something else with that down the road? Would you be?
I
Because
think
I,
it'd be
because
fascinating to do that. I mean, to be
yeah.
typically kind of the root of cricket would be interesting. I don't know whether it would appeal to Netflix, but it would appeal to a lot of people like you and other people who, you know, I mean, it's something which just interests me. What is it about? I mean, I was looking into sort of the idea of ceremony as well. That cricket is a game of ceremony. The empires come out and they're dressed in a certain way, and the cricketers are dressed in a certain way, and it's about rules. But ceremony in India and Pakistan it's a huge thing, and is is hugely important in all religions, and I think cricket is a game of ceremony, and that's something which also kind of interested me. How does it connect to the root culture of both countries?
Fascinating. I really would be interested to see that whenever and if that transpires. We're talking about, partition, just to kind of segue for like 30 seconds. There have been so many films that have been made on partition in India, in Pakistan, in the west part of the world. There's one film, if because you're sort of talking about this, and I think you'll like it. It was made in, I would like to guess, late 90s or early 2000s. It's called 1947 Earth. If you know Deepa Mehta, the director, she made
I
a
haven't seen.
trilogy. Yeah, that's probably to me. I mean, I haven't seen all Partition movies, but I've seen a lot. The best film because it's more about three characters
Yeah.
and how they are sort of wrapped around all this animosity and hate that initiates. So I highly recommend that you check that out. It's a great film.
Yeah, that sounds really. I'll definitely look that out. That's very very interesting. But we had a whole section, a larger section on partition and as again the root cause of the rivalry and how that all kind of started. The idea that this British lawyer comes along and fairly randomly puts a line through the country, and that was something which was kind of also. And we have in the title sequence, you can see there's a shot of a cricket pitch from
Yeah.
above, and the art department did this incredible job of creating a map of India on the pitch. I wanted this idea of the country on a pitch, and they did a beautiful job of actually. That was I didn't want to do it in post production because you could have done it in post production fairly easily.
Yeah.
But actually, the idea of doing a drone shot rising above and seeing this line of the country, and then the red line which demarcates the two different countries on a cricket pitch, I thought was a labour of love, which was fun to kind of pull off.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching that. Let's go back to the Genesis. I mean, in the recent years there have been few cricket series. I really enjoyed the Test, which was season 1 and 2 on Amazon about the Australian cricket team. There was one on the IPL which I haven't seen. I think it was they were following the Mumbai Indians team, and obviously now yours. What was the genesis, and when did that genesis take place?
Well, Grey Matter, who are the company who produced it, the producers there, Payal and her husband Chandradev Bhagat, they've been working on this idea for a while. Chandradev has worked in cricket all his life. Basically, he's passionate cricket enthusiast, and I think they just basically realised that there was a gap in the market, that no one had actually made something which seemed in a way so obvious. The idea of rivalry and cricket, and actually talking about it for a change, rather than just being like whenever they meet, in a World Cup, people start talking about it then, but actually a series and the fascinating history. The idea. I mean, again, we didn't get into it, but for a long time they played out draws. The cricket was really boring because no one dared to win,
Yeah.
because winning was too much of a risk for unity to a certain extent. So that's also very kind of fascinating, really. So I think it came from them, and they came to me. I've done quite a bit of sport documentary work, and then for cinemas and that kind of stuff. So Chandradev knew someone here who knew me, who I'd worked with on a series about Manchester City. Cricket is not something which I am hugely knowledgeable about, but I love sport as a games to actually talk about people. Really, that's to understand people. I always find that the most compelling. Really, that sport tells
Mm.
us much about ourselves, and actually we play sport for all kinds of reasons, but generally speaking, we can't fight each other anymore, and we can't have these passionate feelings because they seem rude and impolite in normal society. But at a game, you can scream and shout and cry and celebrate all in a short amount of time, and that's still a great thing.
It is. I can't tell you. I mean, I I used to watch a lot of cricket growing up, of course. But then I think mid 90s, which was probably Pakistan's best cricket until like early 2000s, I didn't. And then I remember watching the cricket series in 2004, and then the whole thing happened with the fixing and all that, and it kind of lost interest, and it came back in. But India and Pakistan match, right? It's like even if you don't watch anything else, you have to watch that. And there's just so much tension. Like I remember specifically this one match which you kind of just showed at the very end, and I think it was 2021 World Cup where they won by 10 wickets, Pakistan.
Yeah, yeah. It was the
Yeah.
first one we filmed. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I remember even when it was like 100 runs and no wicket, I'm like, anything can happen in a matter of minutes. And that was actually, that happened earlier this last year when Pakistan was almost winning, and then out of
Yeah.
nowhere, that happened because of pressure. It's all about the mental pressure that gets
Such
to
a
you.
mental game, isn't it? I mean, cricket is such a mental game,
Yeah.
and that's why sort of when we had that section in the film about Sehwag and how he got into, he worked with sports psychologists, and he couldn't find a way to control his mind, and the only way was to sing.
Yeah.
That he just emptied his mind and had a song in his head, and that was a fun thing to sort of to kind of play with.
Yeah, I remember this was something I watched a couple of years ago. There were the stump mics. They released some footage where he was actually singing different songs and just whacking the ball. And I mean, he was a great player. It was like either do or die. And when you do, and then it's more likely it's gonna go all the way to the 100, right? So
Yeah, his history. Actually, we had a little bit of again, which sadly got lost. But there was a great sequence we did with him. There's some reconstruction of him
yeah,
watching the cricket on the TV, and then sort of doing some shadow batting. But we also had a little section which was where he used to play, and where he used to play was on a really rough field, basically with his friends. So we had a bunch of kids playing in a beautiful sort of sequence with the sun setting and everything. And he said because the pitch was bumpy, you had to hit it. You hit it up over the boundary constantly because the pitch was bumpy. The ball didn't go very far, and there was grass or whatever. So you had to hit it hard. So that's how he learned to hit the ball in the air. And also he also says, doesn't he, there are no fielders in the air. But yeah, his background and how he learned to play that way was featured.
yeah. So you have obviously the story revolves mainly around Sehwag and Shoaib Akhtar,
Yeah,
but there are other people. You have Ganguly, you have Miadad, you have Inzamam, and who else you had?
Gavaskar.
Uh, Gavaskar. So you have all these people. So I know from experience, like when you're getting into a documentary, like you have to sort of sometimes you have to figure out the story before you start production, and sometimes you have started production, you have to you're trying to look for a thread as to which two characters or three characters. Were there ever other than Sehwag and Akhtar,
They,
sort of?
they no, they were always the lead too. We wanted, because obviously they were both figured heavily in 2004. We
Yeah,
wanted to kind of, to a certain extent, heroes to be our kind of center points, and they seemed like the obvious, the 309 which Sehwag scored in that match, the first 300 by an Indian. That seemed extraordinary, and Shoaib Akhtar, it's hard to ignore his pulling power really, and in the film he's an absolute kind of hero. He's a star, isn't he? He's great at telling stories. He was very open. He said some extraordinary things. He talked about his relationship with Inzamam, and this line he has about I'm a sports car. Leash me out on a weekend car. Leash me out on a Friday night. Don't run me into the ground was what he was
yeah,
saying. So yeah, those two are, and both are both are real characters. Verinder Sehwag is quietly got a twinkle in his eye, and quite a good foil for Shoaib, who's more of a showman, really. So those
yeah.
two were quite a good choice, I thought.
And they're really good friends in real life too. They're really good friends, and they tweet at each other during an India-Pakistan game just to
Yeah,
tease each other. But they're really good friends off the field.
yeah.
Um, um, in terms of filming, you went to India, you went to Pakistan. Were there any challenges that you guys faced in terms of access, in terms of locations, permissions?
Yeah, I mean, constant issues. I've never filmed in that part of the world before. I mean, it was at the time we were filming in basically April, May into June, sort of thing. That kind of time in India and Pakistan.
Nice weather. Nice weather.
It was brutal. It was. Someone said it was the hottest ever on record in those two countries. So, first of all, it was 40 degrees every day plus, and we had people, sometimes fainting from the heat or having to sit out because when we were outside, it was very, very hot. And I think, filmmaking of that size on a documentary is reasonably new in that part of the world. Obviously, Bollywood and those huge productions happen, but the production team did really well just pulling together kind of some of these things. We had an issue at the border. We wanted to film at the border, and we had an issue once where we turned up and then we found out that the permissions hadn't come through. So we waited and waited and waited, and there was this amazing ceremony we wanted to film with Sehwag, and we annoyingly didn't come through in time, and we couldn't do it. It's so frustrating. So we had done other stuff, but we had to come back. Those kind of things. So and going to Pakistan, I mean, from the Western world, you get a certain opinion of what Pakistan is and will be. And I think honestly, I was nervous about going to Pakistan. But honestly, it was one of the most amazing travel experiences of my life. And it felt like, 2004 over again. They welcomed us. We turned up at the airport. We thought, there's going to be hassle at the airport, but they'd arranged us to sort of basically be met by one of the officials and swept all the way through customs and straight out. And from that point onwards, Taha, who was the producer out there, and showed us the most amazing time. They looked after us like brothers, and incredibly generous with their sort of hospitality. It's kind of what you see in the footage about the 2004 the Friendship Tour. We certainly felt the genuine warmth and kindness and hospitality when we were out there, and it was a great experience. Really was.
I was going to ask you, what were the similarities and differences between visiting India and Pakistan? Not from a, film standpoint, just the experience. So you already answered the Pakistan part. What was India like? Were there similarities? Were there differences?
Well, I mean, I remember turning up in Pakistan and we hadn't eaten any much meat in India, and then we turn up to this massive, great kind of barbecue which they'd arranged, and ate all the meats we hadn't eaten in India. There's definitely a slight character difference. I mean, are you heralding from Pakistan originally? Your heritage is Pakistan, is it?
Yeah, I am, and I actually went to India in 2013 for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I had the same thing, like, as a Pakistani going to India, what would the experience be like? And
Yeah.
it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, like the hospitality there and the people, whenever they found out, like I mostly didn't disclose that I was originally from Pakistan, but if they did find out, their attitude towards me changed in such a way for a positive. Like,
Mm.
oh, you're our neighbor, But sorry, go on. I kind of
No,
went
no.
on.
I mean, I think that's very. I mean, we're. I was there with a British cameraman, and we didn't know what to expect from either country. But everyone in India was so sort of kind as well, and welcoming, and really hardworking. Everyone worked their socks off to kind of get the production right, and film in all these different locations and deal with the complications and locations falling through, and the usual kind of things. And we were based in Mumbai, and just getting around Mumbai is a real thing. It's the streets are full of traffic constantly, and
Yep.
it was a great experience to kind of film in both those countries. We also obviously filmed in UAE. We filmed Waka Yunus in Australia, because that's where he lives.
Right.
So and he was a great contribution, and who else? We had a great time, and we had John Wright we filmed John Wright in Mumbai as well. He was a good contributor, and I think there's a great line in the film where he talks about where he was feeling quite down during the tour because India were losing, and one of the bowlers who was helping them out said,
Anil Kumble.
no, I think it was one of the ones who was helping them out. It was like one of the junior bowlers who the Pakistanis had given.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yes.
He said the glory is in the struggle, and I think that's what I take away, from the whole thing. It was a very, very tough shoot, very, very tough experience. But I think when you look back, you learn a lot, and you come away hopefully a stronger person, and a person who has experienced some pretty kind of extraordinary things.
Right. I want to go back to your early days of career, but before I do, just a random question. Do you remember any specific dishes from India and Pakistan that you really liked? Just one.
One dish. I don't remember what they're called, but they're in India. They had these sort of little ball things,
Oh, it's called thali. Like you have different assortment of food.
yeah,
Is that what? Yeah.
unbelievable. I thought the taste of that was just incredible. It was sort of delightful. And I thought, well, why don't we see that in the UK? Because that was like a delicious snack. That was something I never had before, so that was really nice. I think Pakistan, the barbecues and the meats and all that stuff was my greatest memory of that, and the hospitality from the Pakistanis out there to sort of generously take us around. Shoaib was amazing. He kept on turning up in our rooms and got people to bring us cakes, and he became a sort of friend out there. He messaged me recently, and he's delighted that the program's gone to it's #1 in India and Pakistan. So
Of course.
Netflix, yeah. Well, so that's great for him, and everyone's waited a long time for it to come out. So we're all delighted that that's happened. So yeah.
Amazing. The thing with that thali is that in the Indian assortment, it's actually supposed to be really, really healthy for you because you're just getting a bit of everything. You're not doing overdosage of one particular food. And I find that very, I've had a few times in India and here too, and I really enjoy that. And of course, I haven't been back to Pakistan in 35 years, but I remember the food, when I was young there. But yeah, I mean, food is just totally different and a wonderful experience. But going back to your early years, Stewart, what brought you into journalism or filmmaking? What was the catalyst in taking you on this journey to be where you are
I mean, I
today?
have no background, no family in film or anything like that. I think I was interested in photography and took photographs and won a couple of competitions. And I did a degree in English and drama, and I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I ended up getting a job as an assistant photographer for a bit. And then quite soon realizing that the technical side wasn't something, that the cameras and the technical side was not interesting to me. I was more interested in the sort of the artistic side and the image making, but the technical side, I wasn't particularly good at it, I don't think either. So I left that, and then I decided. Then I kind of went through a bit of traveling. I went to Italy with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and kind of when you don't really know about filmmaking, you kind of put together your talents. And I thought, okay, I like writing, I like photography, and then then it suddenly kind of struck me that actually, well, filmmaking should be something I should like, shouldn't it? But I had no idea how to do it. So I just started making my own things, just independent films, just little things. I got grants from the Arts Council in the UK and started making I made a documentary. Then I traveled to Berlin, where they had a production company where if you made, it was a TV station where if you would make a film for them, then they would give you the equipment to make the film and the edit suite for free. So I thought that was great. So I did that. Then I got a job with IMG, which is a sports production company, and directed there for a couple of years. Went back to film school. That kind of got my kind of passion about film even more kind of going. And I wrote my first screenplay, which was called Fast Food, which was a low budget feature film off the back of that, really. Which with no kind of I'd done a road movie before that, which was like super low budget, like nothing. We borrowed the cameras from the production company. Without telling them on the weekends, which was a bit naughty. But and then we raised about 17,000 pounds, I think, to make Fast Food, and we were lucky enough to get a great cast. Gerard Butler was in it, which is quite something. He's now got a Hollywood career, so he was the start of his career then, and we had a good cast, and that film went to Cannes, and it got sold and went to various film festivals and that kind of stuff. And
Wow.
yeah, so that was an experience. So I mean, and then after that, I got another film with a proper budgeted film with Sky, which was like a $5 million feature film called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which I wrote as well. With Stellan Skarsgård and Chris Penn and some great cast like that. Paul Bettany was in it as well, another big star now. So, but actually to carry on a drama career in this country isn't always the easiest thing to do. You know, we're not so set up, especially at that time, to have, you know, a lot of people doing that. And sport was still something which I found interesting, and so I did more short form, and then slowly got back into doing kind of feature length kind of documentaries. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an eclectic journey, really. So, you know, I like doing both things. I'm writing a screenplay at the moment, which has been picked up by an American producer, and we're developing that, putting that project together. Hopefully, that'll come off fairly soon. He helped produce Monkey Man. I don't know if you know the Monkey Man, the
Yeah,
film.
yeah, yeah. Are you
So
talking about what's his name? The guy who's made Get Out, because he produced Monkey Man, right? What's his
yes,
name?
not that one actually. I'm not sure that I can say who it
No,
is
no,
actually.
that's fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ask you that.
There are a few producers on it, but
Yeah, yeah.
he's a fantastic guy, and he's picked up this film, which actually is an international film, which is set in Mumbai again. So hopefully we'll end up going back there and filming in Mumbai. Um, but it's with an international cast. You know, it's a bit of a crossover between something like Extraction and District 9, sort of.
Mm.
So that kind of milieu. But in the meantime, I'm you know doing some. I did a BBC film just recently about a footballer called Mark Hughes, and yeah, I mean. You know, I do various things. I develop sort of short form content for people. I'm doing an extreme sports thing as well. I'm signed with an agency in India called Tulsi, one of the
Yep.
biggest agencies out there, who are a good bunch, and they're coming up with a bunch of opportunities. So, you know, I think I'm lucky enough to be doing my hobby as a job. I mean, that's whatever I do. I always feel grateful to be doing it, and the fact that, you know, when you have the opportunity to have the playground of filmmaking, whether that's in drama or in documentary, it's a great playground, and you know, I'm still learning as I hoped I always will be, because if you get stuck in a rut, then you're in trouble, I think, really. But I still find it incredibly exciting to work with people and to take on a project.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more in that last part where you can, you know, that pigeonhole thing, and I I find it with myself too, and that's not because somebody put me to it. It just kind of happened where, you know, I'm directing human rights documentaries revolving around protagonists. The posters are in the back. I'm just gonna give a little plug.
Yeah, yeah.
But and now I'm working on another like a fiction that deals with what's going on in the Middle East. But I'm really interested in now, like, you know, it's funny because I used to wonder, like, all these series were coming out, like, why isn't anybody making stuff on cricket, right? Like, and the test came out and your series came out, and I've been for the last 3 years, I've been trying to get something going because, and I may email you about it if that's something of your interest,
Mhm.
that's relevant to cricket and that's something happening right now. But it's sports is the future. The way it is going right now. Films, I don't know how much they're going to be in terms of generating revenue and profit, but live sports is where everybody's jumping in terms of investment. So, you know, doing something in sports area here and there, balancing it out with other stuff is definitely a good move.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it. You see how, you know, Saudi are now jumping on sport and using
Mm,
it as a, you know, also a place to draw people in. You know, people. You know, it's a in a way you can't judge you around. You know, no one's judged around sport. I suppose, funny enough, in cricket, you know, that it is very political, but so often sport can just be sport, and you can just enjoy it for kind of what it is. Yeah, and it's always got great stories. You know, I always enjoy a good a good sports kind of documentary, and I think there are a few good sports films as well, movies as well out there, but it's probably trickier. There was one about the Indian team, wasn't there? I think their World Cup win, and it's called, I think was it called 1983?
Yeah. That was really good. It was called 83. It was just called
83,
83.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, that was really good. It
yeah.
was really good. There's actually a really good sports film that came out in the 70s starring Sylvester Stallone that I don't know why nobody talks about. It's called Victory Escape.
Escape to Victory.
Yeah, so it's basically during, I think if my memory serves me right, it's there's an American team which is in prison. I think it's during World War II or some era, I don't remember.
They're in that
And
big prison, yeah, in the famous prison, aren't they? Yeah.
yeah, and
Right.
they have to play a soccer tournament
Yeah.
to sort of, initiate their escape. So
Yeah.
it's an interest. I highly recommend that. I actually got to see that again. It's been a while since I've seen
It's
it.
quite a well-known film in the UK because it's got a lot of football, soccer players in it, including Pele and various other really big names. So the inmates are various very famous footballers, which is always
No, I
causes.
didn't know that.
It's quite an iconic movie. That yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen Beckham?
The documentary. Yes, I have. Yeah, I have. I thought
Yeah,
it was yeah,
I
really
thought
interesting.
that was one of the best sports documentary series I've seen. I mean, I don't know anything about the what kind of stuff that guy went through. It was just mind-boggling, but it's crazy that how much pressure, sports players have to go through with despite all the limelight that we see, it's way more intense.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously he married a Spice Girl, and he was already really famous, and has the looks and the playing ability to really shine. And he's still a big star. I actually filmed with him recently for the film I made for the BBC, and he was such a charming, lovely person. He felt very genuine. He gave us the time. I think you often find that the really big stars are the ones who are particularly kind of decent people, and you don't become an England captain and do what he did without being a good guy. And yeah, he was great. He was great in our series, and I think the Beckham thing is really well made, and I like that style of filming as well. I like the fact that the questions are thrown in. I always I actually like documentaries when you have less archive and there's more, the real person is in it. I did a film about Kenny Dalglish, and do you know about Kenny Dalglish?
No.
Have you heard of Hillsborough?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was a disaster in Hillsborough. Kenny's a hugely popular, famous footballer in this country. He was Scottish, and he played for Liverpool in their pomp in the sort of 70s and 80s, and he ended up managing them. And in that time, he was the manager when the Hillsborough disaster happened. He was there when that happened, and I wanted to try and understand really what that disaster meant to him. And so with all of his experiences, I was trying to take him back. So I took him back to his house where he grew up, and I said, can we go back to the ground where that happened? And he said, I can't go back to that ground. And I said, but we're trying to try and tell it sort of in a way where it's not just like someone talking, but we see you connected to it in a way where, and we had back and forth. And then he came up with an idea. He said, I'll go to the hill overlooking the stadium. So we have a sequence where we have him talking about those days and driving to the ground. And then we have this amazing sequence where he parks his car and we're on a hill, middle of nowhere in the countryside. And he walks down this road and stops, and he's facing out over this view. And in the distance is this stadium. And it's just a incredibly powerful and moving way of connecting
Wow.
in the present day, because those things don't leave you. When 90, I think it's 97 people died in that disaster, and it never leaves you. And stories came out as well when he was talking about it, which was his son was in that end. He didn't know, despite being the manager, he didn't know. So we found this footage of when his son is discovered, and you see Kenny who's a very kind of, he holds his emotions in check all the time, but just there's one time where you see just a little break in that man of concrete and steel, and that says everything when someone doesn't show their emotions, and that comes through. So, film's an emotional kind of medium, and I like to try and bring that out, really.
I was reminded of with the one little thing, and then I'll kind of come back to your series before I wrap up. I was swiping through one of the social medias, and there was an interview with Sylvester Stallone, I don't know, with Howard Stern or somebody, and he was talking about First Blood, the very first Rambo, and he said the original the first cut that we did, it was almost 3 hours long because he had way more dialogue
Right.
than in the film. So he would just respond in a very, sarcastic way to the police officer and everything. And they took that all out. And the reason that film works, which he talked about, is because there's just something about not showing your emotion or saying what you feel that pulls the audience in to
Yeah.
your character, and it just doesn't let go. And I think that's just bang on. That is so true. Just keeps you
Absolutely.
wondering.
Yeah. Do you write drama as well yourself?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, when I've been writing the script and working with the producer in LA, the more I got into it, the more I was taking dialogue out. Really, I mean, taking dialogue out, adding in imagery. So because the audience, we're primal beings, aren't we? And we are imagery is what, before we could speak, images and noises and sounds is really what we react to. So if you can tell it as much as possible. I love dialogue in films. I loved, great dialogue is also amazing. But sometimes, when you get to the points where it's the most emotional, is just sort of beautiful visuals and amazing soundtrack, those kind of things, but really, really break you, I think, as the audience.
I agree. I agree. And I'm having this challenge right now where I'm there's a film that I'm working on called Whispers in Time, and it's a short. It's like a proof of concept to make a feature. And it's like I keep telling my DP, he's a friend of mine, it's like, I need to cut the dialogue. I need to cut that. But the thing is, if I cut the dialogue too much, then there's a fine line, right? Like you have to convey the emotion. Certain
Yeah,
things do require dialogue, but how much do you have to go? How much is too much? And that's where the challenge and the fun comes into play.
no, totally.
Um, because I mean, I think the curiosity thing, if you look at Jaws, the shark not working, or you don't say what you feel, I think that just pulls, it's a psychological thing. We become way more curious about what somebody's feeling or
Yeah.
thinking than being told what they're feeling or thinking.
No, no, totally. I think the hard thing is when you're selling a project, you're trying to get a project off the ground, is that the script is a sales document, and people have to understand it. So my thing is always when I write action, I would never have more than 3 lines of action, and usually it's just 1 line of action, because you want to really kind of get it quickly, and then kind of not have people stuck in loads and loads and loads. And I think, but you also don't want to get them lost. So with dialogue, sometimes you might add a line more because you want them to, that the actor will do an expression or will do something which will totally nail that. And you go, why would I need that line? I don't need that line because that expression says it all. But you can't write that in a script in the same way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Sometimes the actors, like, yeah, they even in a documentary, if it's not an actor, it's just like a protagonist. Like sometimes the emotions just are able to pull off so much more, and that's what's incredible about it. Are you looking for? Are you going to watch the next game that's coming up in the next 2 weeks? I think it's
Yeah,
February
yes, I
23rd.
think yeah, it's exciting. I mean, there was a big negotiation, wasn't there, around where they should play and all the rest of it. But I think, yeah, I'll definitely be up for watching that. It's an exciting time.
Wonderful. Well, it's been a pleasure having you, Stuart. I'm really thrilled about what you're working on and what you have obviously, told me about what you have worked on. Incredible series, India versus Pakistan, the rivalry on Netflix. I urge everyone to check it out, and thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been great to talk to you, Joe, and hope we'll catch up again in the future.
I'm sure we will.
Right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.